Greetings ladies and gentlefish, and welcome to this review of the Tier 8 Premium German Heavy Tank, the Lowe, or Lion if you prefer the English translation. Where does this tank fit in historically? Well, essentially, Hitler, in his infinite wisdom, with his massive amounts of military genius, decided that the war was going to be won by ever larger and more heavily armoured machines that were also increasingly immobile, despite evidence to the contrary. And so he wanted a series of proposals put forward for a new super heavy tank. There are a couple of designs put forward. This was the design from the Krupp company. It went through a couple of different iterations. It eventually lost out in 1942 to the Porsche design, which was the mouse. And while there were a couple of mice, but it's really awkward because it's not actually a mouse. Anyway, while there were a couple of these things mocked up, they never saw real production. And they never would have worked because the bridges couldn't support them. They were the size of a small European country. The, insert air force of choice would have bombed the hell out of them. It just would have, and Germany had no petrol at the time. All of which are rather large problems. Anyway, I digress. As a result, the Lowe was never actually manufactured. Now, there are a couple of different versions of this tank put forward. Basically, one with a centre-mounted turret and one with a rear-mounted turret. What we have here at Tier 8 is the one with the centre-mounted turret and 120mm of frontal sloped armour. Interestingly, of course, there was a big difference in weight between clearly the Krupp design here, which is pushing 100 tons, and the mouse from Porsche, which is twice that weight. And if you actually look at the armour thickness and profile and everything, the Lowe has much more in common with the Tiger II, the King Tiger. Bengal Tiger, Queen's Tiger, goes by a variety of different names, some official, some not. Again, you're looking at kind of 100 and... In fact, the King Tiger has thicker armour than the Lowe, but anyway, I digress. So as a result, here, despite the fact that it was produced to... or that it was designed to fulfil the same brief as the mouse, which is at Tier 10, and of course the Lowe is at Tier 8. In the game, it's matched up against other Tier 8 heavies, so things like the Tiger II, and I think that makes far more sense, given the tank's capabilities. So, in terms of the game, this tank has been in the game for a very long time, and it has a reputation for being dreadful. Is that fully deserved? Well, hopefully this video will tell you that, but in short, a lot of the reason why this tank is considered dreadful is because it is one of those early premium tanks in the game that a lot of people bought when they decided to play the game, had absolutely no experience of, jumped into their Tier 8 Lowe and absolutely sucked in it. So a lot of the reputation this tank has for being terrible is because the people playing it were terrible, not because necessarily the tank is terrible itself. Anyway, what do we get in game? Well, let's kick things off. We have 1650 hit points, which for a Tier 8 heavy tank is a lot. Let's compare it with the Tiger II, which has 1600, which is still above average, so it's more than the Tiger II. The IS-3 is down at 1500, just to give you a point of reference. So 1650 is very healthy. It is a 91-ton machine with my loadout. That's quite heavy. Don't ram this thing. Just don't do it. It's not worth it. 800 horsepower engine, which sounds very good, but when you have a 91-ton tank, actually that's not great, and you end up with a horsepower to ton ratio of less than 10. 8.81 horsepower per ton. Combine that with the 35km/h top speed limit, which sounds alright, but you very rarely reach. The traverse speed of 24 degrees a second, the turret traverse of 23, and what you actually have, especially when you throw in the ground resistance, is actually rather a sluggish tank. This is not fast at all. It's called the Lowe, some people call it the Slurver. That really comes from people mispronouncing Lowe to Lowe, and then people call it the Slow. Anyway, armour, we'll talk more about armour in a bit. In the garage it says on the hull 80, 100, 120, and on the turret 80, 80, 120. Those figures are actually true. Clearly you have things like angling and gun mantlet to take into account. The angling on the front of the hull of this tank is not actually particularly good. I mean, compare that with the Tiger II, especially on that lower plate and that midsection here. You have this flat midsection on the Lowe that you do not get on the Tiger II. basically the hull armor is good enough versus lower tiers. The front of the turret is where you can bounce higher penetration guns. We'll talk more about the gun in a minute. The gun has always been advertised as the selling point of the Lowe. It has good features and it has bad features. It's a bit of a trade-off. 400 meter view range is up there with the T-32 and the Carnarvon for tier 8 heavy tanks. 710 meter signal range is perfectly good. And will keep you in contact with the rest of your team, so yes, hurrah. Everyone loves radios. Not going to talk about crew skills because you should be putting whatever German heavy tank crew you have into this tank. The machine gets one of each of the crew members, so one commander, one gunner, one driver, one radio operator, and one loader. Exactly the same configuration as the Tiger II and most of the German heavy tanks. There are a few exceptions, like when you jump to tier 10 in the Maus, and you suddenly realise you have to recruit a new loader from somewhere, which is really annoying. But the Lowe has your standard German heavy tank crew layout, so no biggie there. The gun, well, here is the gun. It's the 105mm KWK L70 gun, not to be confused with the 75mm L70, of course. It's a 105mm gun with 5 rounds a minute rate of fire. Now that's bad when you consider that it has 320 alpha damage. What this means is that the Lowe has low DPM. In fact, I think it might be the lowest of all of the tier 8 heavies, joint lowest that is, with the T-34, the American tier 8 premium heavy tank. But then you have to remember the T-34 packs 400 alpha. So yeah, there is that. This alpha rate of fire combination does not make for high DPM. 234 penetration on its standard AP rounds is however very nice, and you have to bear in mind the Lowe is one of those tanks that gets full regular tier 8 matchmaking, so it will see tier 10s. If you want to fire a bit of APCR, your penetration jumps up to just shy of 300, and with your HE rounds you get 420 alpha and 60 penetration. 320 alpha, I should say, is very average for a tier 8 heavy tank. That's nothing to really note. 0.33 dispersion at 100 meters. If you let this gun fully aim, it is very accurate. 2.9 second aim time is okay for a heavy tank, and the effective aim time on this tank is actually not bad because it's so slow, so you don't really end up moving particularly quickly, so you're not really gonna bloom the gun out too much. If we just compare it with the gun found, the L68 105mm gun found on the Tiger II, the Tiger II's gun aims faster and is actually more accurate. Same alpha damage. Slightly lower penetration, but this is only a 9mm difference, and a significantly faster rate of fire. Now, this is where... So here's the thing. The Lowe's gun has always been advertised as being the selling point of the tank, being a very good gun. The penetration on the gun is good. The accuracy on the gun is good. The other stats, not so much. They're either mediocre or bad. And when you compare it with the Tiger II's gun, and the Tiger II's gun, when you play the Tiger II, doesn't feel anything particularly special, you actually notice that the Tiger II's gun all round is probably better. So the reputation for this L70 105mm gun on the Lowe being really good is kind of undeserved. Part of this may well be because it got that reputation back in the early days. Remember, this tank has been in the game for a long time, and it's since been a bit power creeped, but either way, the gun is alright, but you're not going to get yourself too excited about it, frankly. Consumables, I have your standard 3 consumables here. I mean, you could swap out for chocolate or something, I guess, if you wanted. I haven't noticed massive fire problems with the Lowe. Choose your poison, but I've just got your standard 3 consumables here. Equipment, I think there's only really two, maybe two ways to go. Vertical stabilizer, because if you can mount a vert stab on a tank, you should. Gun rammer, because generally if you can mount a gun rammer on a tank, you probably should. Third equipment slot, I have vents. You could go with coated optics to boost up that view range. Kind of up to you. Either choice would do the job. Some people might say, put a spool liner on it. I say, no, don't put a spool liner on it. Why? Well, yes, this thing can mount a super heavy spool liner, which is great, but if you actually look at what it does, 50% protection of the crew from injuries, that's nice. 50% armor protection from ramming and explosions, so from high explosive shells, not penetrating you. Here are 2 important points. 1, it relies on the HE shells not penetrating you in the first place, and 2, it just increases your armor protection. Now, the raw thickness of the Lowe's armor is not great, generally speaking, and so you're not actually going to get much use out of the spore liner. I have a spore liner on my mouse, which has awesome armor, but I do not have one on my Lowe. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it either. Are there any other equipment pieces you might want to go for? Nah, not really. Of course, I don't have to talk about the grind with this tank. It's a premium tank. There is no grind. So we're not going to bother with that. The one thing I will mention is that this tank gets 8 degrees of gun depression, which is quite nice. Over the rear here, you can see the turret is slightly depressed and you've got the engine deck sticking out. It's 5 degrees over the rear, but it's 8 over the front and sides. And that's really shows you how you end up playing this tank. You basically go hull down, use your gun depression, only show the front of your turret, and shoot people with your 105mm gun. Now, this is a Tier 8 premium tank, so of course you are in it for the money. And what about the earning potential on this tank? Well, it's good news and it's bad news. Good news, you have an accurate gun with decent penetration, and so generally speaking you penetrate what you aim at with your armor-piercing shells, providing you let the gun aim. Bad news, the aiming time isn't fantastic, so if you take your shot not fully aimed, you may well bounce, and your shells are over 1,000 credits each for 320 alpha damage. That's kind of Soviet Tier 9 medium tank levels of money, you know, bang for your buck, if you will, and that's not actually very good. Usually when you see shells costing 1,000 credits, they tend to do about 390 alpha, or you would like them to do 390. This one only does 320. I mean, let's, for example, switch to the Chinese. Let's look at the 112. These shells are basically the same price. This is 1,025 credits compared with the Lowe's 1,030, so the Chinese shells are actually slightly cheaper, and they do 390 alpha. Now, I know there's other things to bear in mind with that, but it's just to point out that actually the gun isn't massively profitable. It's the same price as on the Tiger 2. I don't mean the gun's not profitable, I mean the shells are expensive. Now, obviously this is a Tier 8 premium tank, so it gets an enhanced credit multiplier. But in my experience, what you find with the Lowe is that you very rarely get those spectacular games where you make shed tons of money, but you're never going to lose money either. I mean, if you're playing the 112 or the Super Pershing, for example, because you are sometimes reliant on firing some of those premium rounds, and even the premium rounds aren't actually that reliable, you can actually lose money if you're not running a premium account on some games. The Lowe, I don't think I've ever lost money. I don't think I've ever even come close to losing money with this tank. So it's a consistent and reliable money maker. And this is really what the Lowe is like. It's consistent and reliable without being spectacular. Anyway, I've rambled on long enough. We'll look at the module locations, armor scheme, and then I'll show you some gameplay. So let's have a look at the critical module locations for the Lowe. Frontally, you can see this red section, you have frontal transmission. It's a German tank, that shouldn't come as a massive surprise. But of course, as of some patches ago now, you no longer get set on fire from shots that damage your frontal transmission. So while it's obviously not optimal having your transmission in the front from a game perspective, or from gameplay perspective, it's not as bad as it used to be. Driver sitting over here, unsurprisingly behind the driver's hatch. Now this does actually say that you have this orange section here indicating either a commander, gunner or loader. Personally, I would find that very difficult to believe. It makes far more sense. Typically you have both all of the commander, gunner and loader in the turret, so I would treat this with a pinch of salt. It might be a radio operator sitting here though, bear in mind. Side profile, you have an ammo rack sitting here below the turret in the middle of the tank. You've got, again, like a gunner or loader or something on the side of the turret here, and the rear you've got fuel tanks and engine and all that jazz to worry about. From the rear, clearly you've got fuel tanks back here. You have your turret ammo rack on toward the right-hand side of the turret, which is something to bear in mind. And your commander sits here, unsurprisingly, below your commander's hatch. That's why it's called the commander's hatch. From the other side of the tank, you can see the rear right-hand ammo rack in the turret extending around here. Again, you've got another hull ammo rack below the turret. And again, you've got to worry about that big fat German flammable booty. And from above, the main thing you really need to be concerned about are artillery shells hitting your engine deck back here and setting you on fire and doing a whole world of painful things. So, having looked at all that, let's go and have a look at the armour scheme. So, the armour profile on the Lowe, I mean, unsurprisingly, from the rear, it's garbage. If you're in one of those tanks that actually cares, and you need to aim for weak spots from the rear of the tank, there's a hatch in the rear of the turret here that is technically slightly weaker than the... slightly stronger than the rest, so don't aim for here. But basically, rear of the tank, you can penetrate easily. Side of the tank is 100mm. If it's flat on, again, you can penetrate it fairly easily. Side of the turret here, same as the rear, is 80mm. So that's a relatively simple penetration. If we look at the hull armour to start with, we've got this 120mm plate sloped back at the top. We've got a fairly poorly armoured lower plate, but it's still 120mm, so in terms of raw thickness, it's not a weak spot. But it doesn't matter how much angling you put on this tank, you struggle to get armour values good enough to reliably bounce 200 pen guns. Basically, your hull armour is good enough to get some bounces against lower tiers and some same tier medium tanks. But don't expect this hull armour. Don't expect too much of it. I mean, certainly against 200 pen guns, this hull armour is not particularly good. And a lot of the time against lower pen guns than that. You know, usually the best you can expect to bounce is sort of the 170, 175 pen you tend to get on some of the kind of 90mm and 122mm guns in the game. Most of the armour for this tank is located on the front of the turret. So let's have a look at the front of that turret. What have you got? Well, I mean, you've got this section of side armour, but it's quite a difficult shot to make. Coming onto the front, which is 120mm thick, but sloped back at quite an extreme angle. But you'll notice there's a section of armour here that is around 160 to 200. And so if you're shooting at this tank with a gun and you can only shoot the front of its turret in the sort of 200 pen range, you can try and shoot it sort of down here in the bottom cheeks, and you can sometimes get a penetration. Higher penetration guns, and you can kind of aim a little bit further up on the sides of this cheek. What I'm getting at is that the cheeks and this section below the gun mantlet is a bit weaker, so you can put shots through there. However, if the Lowe driver's sensible, a lot of the time he'll be using his gun depression, making those harder to hit. If we now move on to the gun mantlet, I mean, this is, generally speaking, very, very tough, and you don't want to be shooting here. So, I mean, they did, when they gave it a HD model, they did actually reduce the size of the gun mantlet, but I think they increased the armor values within it. So, I mean, it wasn't a massive change, if we're going to be honest. So from the front, basically, the turret front is very good. If you are forced to shoot the turret front, then kind of down here and along here is not a bad idea, but most of the time you don't want to bother. There is a commander's hatch you could try and hit back here, but again, if the Lowe driver's using his gun depression like a sensible Lowe, this is going to be very difficult to hit. It's not a huge target in the first place, and it's quite far back on the turret toward the rear, so yeah, it's difficult to get shots on that. So the hull armour of the Lowe shouldn't expect too much from. It's good enough to bounce lower tiers if you angle it. If you don't angle it, don't be surprised if you get penetrated. The turret front is where the armour's really at. So here is game number 1. We're top tier, and this is on the Westfield map. I think it's Westfield, is it? Yeah, Westfield. And there's actually an enemy Lowe as well as mine. You do see them floating around ever so occasionally. Now, on Westfield, really, the single most important part of the map, if we're going to be honest, is this hilly region up at C3. It was changed a few patches back. It was the most important region of the map then. It's still the most important region of the map now. And especially if you've got any gun depression, and the Lowe has, you know, half-decent gun depression, you can use these ridges and these hills to just poke your gun up, shoot people in the face and pull back. You can see there's also our T-34 coming up here, which is nice to see. He is our other top tier heavy tank. He also has good gun depression, and I am clearly not paying much attention to what's going on around me at that point as I miss the shot. You know, I had an opportunity for a shot on an IS, but I don't take it. Looks like the IS is not fully upgraded though. That looks like what, an 85mm gun or something. Put a shot into the T-150, but I take a shot from the T-29 for my troubles, and just about managed to dodge artillery into the process. I know, the Lowe dodging things, whatever next. T-29 appears to be distracted by someone else, and I have shots into the side of the turret of that VK, so we'll take those. And T-150, I don't know who he's looking at. He's looking at someone... Nah, I take the shot, but really, that was never going to hit. That was a poor shot to take. Now, this is not the strongest position in the world for me. Hello, Mr. VK. The lower plate of that tank is not particularly a weak spot, but he's just cresting the hill, so the angle that it's at does make it a weak spot for me. I take a shot from the T-29 and a shot from that VK. You can see how well my hull armour holds up against people with half-decent penetration. There we go, another shot from the VK. And I take that as a hint to pull back and stop getting shot by those guys. T-28 Prot has already nailed the T-150. He follows that up by killing the VK. And now that IS and that T-29 are looking a little outgunned, although if you look at the minimap you'll notice that one of their heavy tanks has pushed through the town and is basically outflanking us. So we have to be a bit careful. Shot into the side of the turret on the T-29, not a problem. Nice high penetration on this gun. And you can see that the DPM on this gun is not fantastic. 320 alpha with this reload isn't brilliant. But the gun is generally speaking fairly reliable. Go for the shot on the side of the turret of the T-29 and kill him. And the IS is also taken down, and that leaves the scoreline at 7-5. Now we've got that enemy Lowe and the Borsig having pushed through the town there, so they were doing a bit of outflanking. So I'm going to go back and try and deal with those guys. The Borsig gets smacked very hard and set on fire and is dead. But the Lowe is still here to feed me his HP for all of the credits and all of the experience. Lowe's taking a bit of a fearsome pounding as he's now pretty much on his own and surrounded. That's not the sort of position you want to be in any tank. He's got 433 health remaining. I put one shot in, leave him on 124, and the T-34 picks up the kill. Now there's still this T-34-2 around the town vicinity, plus a couple of medium tanks over at F0. And I don't know where the last guy is at the moment. And just coming up on that T-34 too. Come on, little T-34. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm just going to stab you a bit and steal your stuff. There he is. His armour is not very good at the best of times. Certainly no match for this gun. He's clearly using the big gun, as he just hit me for an awful lot. There we go, the 122 mil. Can we pick up the kill? Yes, we can for kill number 2. However, I'm left on a sliver of health at 115. And we still have 3 enemy medium tanks to finish off. And it does actually occur to me that I'd forgotten to turn on the extended minimap features when I started recording this game. But never mind, let's not worry too much about that now. T-34-85 is wondering what he did to deserve this, and we execute him. And so that just leaves their Pershing and their STA-1. I bounce a shot there, probably from the Pershing. There's Mr. Pershing. So, seeing if I can... Ooh, I bounced another shot there. Need to be a bit careful here. I'm just at that point where he's outside my render range, which is kind of awkward. Take a shot, pull forwards. It looks like my shot might have hit him, which would be hilarious. And side of the turret of a Pershing. Yes, please. Oh, I'm not sure if that hit. And... no, he's down. That just leaves the STA-1. There we go. Take a chunk of his health away. And it's all over, bar the drinks, really, now. Can I reload in time to pick up the kill? Yes, I can. There's kill number 4. And that was the game. So, let's go and have a look at the result. There we go. First class mastery, fighter, duelist, battle brothers, fire for effect, and cool-headed, I think that is, or possibly Spartan, whatever. 3,267 damage done, which is the second highest damage count of our team, or indeed the game. 4 kills, 1,112 base experience, 16 shots fired, 13 hits, 13 pens, for that damage count. most of which was actually from relatively close range. We received 8 hits, of which 5 penetrated and 3 did not, for 640 damage blocked by our armour, which is basically, close as damn it, 3 90mm rounds. 2 enemy vehicles spotted, 8 damaged, 4 destroyed, and only 70 assistance damage, travelling 1.4 kilometres. We made a profit with a standard account of 46,000 credits. With a premium account, that would have been 80,000 credits. It's not the most credits you'd have seen me make in a premium tank, but it's consistent and it's reliable. And made, got a good amount of XP into the bargain. So let's jump into the second game. Here's our second game then, tier 10 game. And we're here on Mines, which is a very small map. So this is not a particularly good map for the Lowe. The Lowe likes to keep people at a respectful distance. And you can see the size of this thing. It's basically the same size as an E100. This is a big, heavy tank. It just doesn't have the armour of an E100. What are you going to do? Anyway, we are, I think, going to see if we can support our friends up toward the hill, if memory serves, in this game. Now there's 1 artillery on the enemy team. It's the tier 10 bat chat. That is a dangerous machine. I mean, all the tier 10 artillery are dangerous, but it may not hit for that much per shot, but it has that 4-round autoloader. Not really able to pull off a shot there against the Indian Panzer, which is a little unfortunate, but we might be able to make up for it in a moment. No dice. Ah well, never mind. And Indian Panzer is dead. T-34 there. Yeah. Lowe there. Yeah. T-30. Ooh. Take off a chunk of his health, and he bounces! Where did he hit me? It must be the turret. Yep. Yeah, there we go. Side of the turret there, ricochet mark. Ha 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 ha. I just missed the Lowe entirely. So there we go. I just bounced as it turns out, it is a 155mm shell with almost 300 pen from a T-34. Oh yeah. Sorry, from a T-30. Not a T-34. Ah, my bad, sorry. T-34 doesn't have a 155mm gun. Well, the two are very similar machines. I think I can be forgiven for getting them muddled once. Accurate gun, going for the shot on the Lowe, which indeed we make, and then our Object 261 shuts him the hell down. Now, I was slightly surprised the Object could make that shot, but the Object is not sitting where artillery usually sits. He is instead up on the hill of failure, so, maybe I guess that means that he could actually make the shot. So we've managed to put in a couple of rounds. And you can see that although the Lowe is a tank that really likes to keep the bad guys at arm's length, we're not sitting at the back of the map. We're getting stuck in. I mean, that's how you're going to make credits, basically. Generally speaking, by getting stuck into the actual fight. So, what have we got? T-34. Don't want to take a shot from him. He has a fairly meaty 120mm gun. Now, it may not be the biggest gun in the world in this sort of matchmaking, but it still damn well hurts. Jagdtiger. Oh, I don't want to take a shot from his 128mm gun. Oh, Lord, no. And we come over to this rock. Now, there's a gap in this rock, which means we can go hull down here, especially with the wreck of the enemy Lowe in the way there, and I want to get a shot into the rear of that T-34, but he appears to not want to let me do that, which I think is terribly unsporting of him. Enemy Jagdtiger is really taking a battering there, and can we pick up the kill on this guy? It's the upper front plate, but that's what 234mm of penetration can do for you with regular armor piercing rounds. Yeah. It's a nice gun, in some respects. So, looks like we might just be able to find a shot on the rear of the T-34 here. There we go. Low damage roll, unfortunately, but we still managed to sneak the shot in, and our E100 polishes the chap off. Ferdinand off, away in the distance. Can we get a shot on this fellow? Take a blind shot. Maybe it did damage, maybe it didn't. I take a shot from someone in return. Now, looking at how much damage it did, it feels like a 105mm gun. Something around about there, because it did me, what, 330 damage. So that feels like 320 alpha. Maybe the Ferdinand has the stock gun. That is possible. It could be a low roll from the IS-3. It could be a high roll from the AMX. Tortoise and Conqueror. That would be a very high roll from a 20-pounder. I'm not even sure if they can roll that high. Or it would be a low roll from the 120mm gun. And none of the others. My money is on the Ferdinand having the stock gun. Or a high roll from the AMX. One or t'other. Probably the Ferdinand with the stock gun, if we're going to be honest. Go for a blind shot off toward the vague direction of the Tortoise and the Ferdinand. Scoreline is 6-5. And the enemy Batchat nukes our IS-3 to make it 6-6. Now I'm very conscious that there's a trio of enemy tanks over on the hill. Not the hill, sorry, the island, if you will. We need to be careful of those guys. I took that shot on the Conqueror, which was a mistake because I think I would have had a better shot on the IS-3. But, nah, there we go. C'est la vie. Can we polish off the IS-3 or do some damage to the Conqueror? IS-3 is exposed, but the pattern beats us to it. Scoreline is 7-7, so things are quite close. If you look at the tier of the tanks remaining, things are still pretty close. Each team has 2 tier 8s, 2 tier 9s and 4 tier 10s remaining, including an artillery piece. So, yeah, things are pretty even in the grand scheme of things. Conqueror and the AMX-50B we know are off, or were last spotted over on the island. E100 is on their side of the hill in the middle of the map, so we know roughly where he was last spotted. We do, however, need to be careful about their clutch of tank destroyers. You know, especially that tier 10 waffle thrower could really ruin my day, so could the Tortoise. I get spotted there, so I pull back. And I'm just trying to see if there's anyone, well, that I can see through here. No, there's the AMX CDC though. If I could pull a shot off on him, I'd probably kill him. But I'm a little bit pinned down now behind this rock. If I move, I get spotted by the AMX or possibly someone else, but certainly the AMX is in a position to potentially spot me. And I don't really want to push forward into the AMX because I'll just get obliterated by all their tank destroyers and anyone they've got across toward the hill. Again, I get spotted. So, a little pinned down here at the moment. Scoreline is 7-8. We did lose one of our tier 10s, unfortunately. That's a lie. No, we didn't. We lost one of our tier 9s, sorry. People fire the 21 gun salute. But again, we're just a little pinned down here behind this rock. So I'm going to speed this along slightly, so that you don't all die of boredom. And now, with the enemy 100 having pushed around to the village, I decided to move around in support of our T-57 Heavy to try and see if we can put any damage on this guy. You know, I have a fairly decent gun for a tier 8, so I can hurt this chap depending on what angle we get. And I guess if I really want to, I could double tap 2 and load my 300 pen APCL rounds, but I have no real desire to do that. I don't think I've ever done that in the Lowe. No dice. So, speed this along a little bit. We're moving back to our previous position as we don't have shots on that E100 and it's just wasting time. Our Object 261 nukes the Conqueror. And suddenly there's a Tortoise over there. Well, the Tortoise appears to be moving vaguely toward us, or he actually is now presenting his... No, that's his front. I thought he was presenting his side to us. Obviously need to be careful of this guy. He has a damn good gun. And if I had a higher penetration gun, that shot could go through, but 230 odd is not quite enough to go through that. If I loaded APCR, I could butter this guy, but I'm not going to because I have no desire to. I would just be throwing credits away. Instead, I'm going to try and track this guy. There we go. And let my friends do the job. He takes a big shot there, possibly from the Object 261. He puts a round into me. I put one into his commander's hatch. And I try to turret hug this guy. I'm not sure how successful I'm going to be. There we go. I take another shot. You can see the rate of fire disparity between myself and the Torty. Take a shot in the bum from the AMX. However, I do manage to finish off the Tortoise. AMX now has me banged to rights, except our T-57 Heavy comes sailing to my rescue and takes the AMX out. That just leaves the 50B and the Batchat on the enemy team. I put a little thank you there in chat, as the T-57 Heavy did just save my bacon. And now with just the artillery remaining, I load the high explosive and go hunting after this Batchat, but it's very unlikely I'm going to be the one to get the kill. This Patton will probably wreck him in the face. Although, having said that, we've made it over toward the enemy base. I'm being overtaken by everyone and their wife. And this is where you see the lack of mobility on the Slurver. Sorry, the Lurver. Some people call it a Slurver because it is slow. Slow Lurver. So, can we get any damage on this Batchat? Come on, Mr. Batchat, feed me. Not a Patton. At this point in time, I'm just thinking, screw it, I'm going to drive around the side of the building. It might give the rest of my team the courage to go and kill this guy. Even if this guy kills one of us with every single shot in his autoloader. Oh, I actually missed my HE round. That was terrible. He can't win the game. And as it is, someone else picks up the kill. That was a terrible shot at the end. I could have put... How much alpha do you get on these HE rounds? 420. I could have put 420 alpha through that guy's turret. Oh well, never mind. Let's just go and have a quick look at the results for this game. Now, that game certainly didn't feel to me particularly noteworthy at the time, but it was apparently enough for first class mastery, fire for effect, and spotter ribbons. We finished second on our team, actually. Kudos to our M48 Patton there. This was a patch 9.9 game, so this is before the Patton got buffed, and he still did 7,230 damage, so a very nicely played game from him. We got 1,880 damage, which is still more damage than we have health, so we definitely pulled our weight, especially considering we were bottom tier. 2 kills, and as it turns out, 1,231 assistance damage. Bounced 1 shot of the 6 that we took from that, from the T30, which was very lucky. But that 1 bounce enabled us to go on, take some hits from the Tortoise and the AMX CDC, and kill the Tortoise and finish the game still alive. Once you've taken all the ammunition costs, made a 38,000 credit profit, and got a good amount of XP into the bargain. So, let's go and round things off in the garage. Overall thoughts on this tank? It's okay. I mean, how much is this thing to buy? Let's just have a quick look in the tech tree. How much is the Lurver? It is 12,500 gold. It's the same price, close as damn it, as the T34, for instance. What does the T34 clock in at? The T34 is 12,000 gold. So it's actually slightly more expensive than the T34. You know, it's that old generation of premium tanks. What about the FCM? The FCM clocks in at 11,900 gold. So it's an expensive machine. Have a quick look at the Chinese ones, actually. 11,000 for the T34-3, and the 112 is 12,250. It's an expensive machine. It gets full matchmaking. You've got no limited matchmaking to rely on. The credit making potential is alright, but it's consistent credit making, not spectacular. And that really sums up the whole tank. The whole tank is slow, ponderous, and methodical. It doesn't do damage quickly, but it generally does damage reliably. It doesn't get anywhere quickly. The hull armor is only really good against lower tiers. The turret front is pretty good, though. The gun is fairly decent in the grand scheme of things, but it's not great. You know, DPM is low. The accuracy, while good, has actually been power creeped by other tanks in the game. The accuracy was, relative to its peers, much better when this tank was first introduced than it is now, just because other tanks have become more accurate, if that makes sense. So, can I recommend this? Well, that's going to really depend. If you can't stand slow tanks, then you will hate the Lurver. If you can't stand tanks that don't have awesome all-round armor, you will hate the Lurver. If you want a tank with awesome all-round armor, go and buy an IS6, Freudian slip there, in patch 9.14 for Christ only knows what reason the IS6 is getting an armor buff, which is just... anyway. So if you want good all-round armor, tier 8 premium tank, get an IS6. If you want your premium to have limited matchmaking, this is not for you. This sees tier 10 games. If you like massive alpha damage, this tank doesn't have it. Don't buy it. If you want a premium tank that will generate you consistent money and that you can use to train your German heavy tank crews, then sure, go and buy yourself a Lowe. Bear in mind it's not that cheap, and don't come complaining to me if you don't like it. In the grand scheme of things, the Lowe isn't great. However, I love mine. I have a lot of fun driving mine. How do I actually do in it? I have no idea. 210 battles played in mine, 54% win rate, 1.1 damage ratio. Yeah, I mean, bearing in mind the Lowe was the first tier 8 premium tank I ever acquired, and so statistically it's probably going to be a bit worse than most of my others, so do bear that in mind. Basically 1400 average damage per game caused is not bad. Yeah, it's alright. Not bad at all. If I compare that with my Super Pershing, for example, and the IS-6, let's pick on those. IS-6, 1480 average damage. I haven't played the IS-6 in a while, actually. Super Pershing, la 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 la. Where's my Super Pershing? Doobie 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 doo ba ba be doo ba. Super Pershing is sitting on 1,434 average damage per game. So yeah, it's there or thereabouts. It's not a bad tank. Just bear in mind that it's quite pricey, and it's not fantastic. So, is it for you? Obviously, that's a decision only you can make for yourself. I'm just presenting the tank, showing you what it's good at, what it's not good at, hopefully, and giving you an idea of what it does, what it's like, and it's up to you to make your own decision. I really enjoy playing the Lowe. I certainly don't regret buying it, but I appreciate it's not a tank that's going to be for everyone. If you like your tanks fast, so here's the thing. If you like medium tank gameplay at the moment and you have the relevant crew, I would recommend the FCM50T because that's fast, mobile, has a decent gun, still gets limited matchmaking, and has enough armor to bounce the odd shot here or there. If you like big alpha guns and you want a premium, go and buy yourself the T-34, has 400 alpha. If you like lots of all-round armor, go and get yourself an IS-6. It gets a shed ton of armor, it's about to get even more, and it gets limited matchmaking. I mean, what more could you want? The Lowe, yeah, there's nothing specifically to recommend it. But as I say, I have fun in mine, I enjoy mine, and I do alright in mine. So, yeah. I'm not going to recommend it to you because that will depend on your own personal situation. Just going to point out the pros and cons, and it's up to you to make up your own mind and come to your own decision. But it's not as bad as the reputation that it has would lead you to believe, but it's also not absolutely fantastic, so make of that what you will. Anyway, that's all I had to say about the Lowe. I hope you guys enjoyed that review, maybe found it informative. If you did, by all means feel free to catch some of my other videos and or subscribe to my channel, and I wish you very happy hunting on that battlefield. Ciao ciao.